Okay, good morning everyone. Thank you for joining us for this session. For this session with Cavell, we are covering how to make data-driven decisions when growing your CCaaS business. So this is using the industry data for CCaaS for this session, whereas last month we went over cloud communications. So we're joined by Patrick and Finbarr from Cavell. They are the experts, the analysts that will be able to guide us through their forecasts and the data that they've gathered from the last half of last year. So we can use those industry trends to make some business decisions together. So yeah, I'll leave you now with Finbarr and Patrick as they go through what they've discovered from last year.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. So as mentioned, we're going to take you through our report from sort of late last year into CCaaS trends. We're going to talk about market forecasts and where we see the market going in the Netherlands. And then we're also going to talk a bit about what trends we've been observing through our conversations with enterprises and service providers, and of course vendors as well, and see what they've been saying. They predicted the biggest trends were for the latter half of last year, and of course moving forward into this year. I think there will be time for questions at the end as well, so just jump in or type them in the chat if you have them. We've got two people from Cavell on, so we'll be more than happy to answer any questions that come up during the presentation. All right, so let's just dive straight in then. So market data. And before we dive into what our market forecasts are, I just want to do a little bit of definition setting in terms of how Cavell sees the market, because I think it's very important to understand the forecasts that are coming up. So it's important that obviously we have that broad definition of a contact center user or agent that includes anyone who's using a contact center platform with sort of a designated contact center functionality. So it doesn't include an informal agent who does contact center, less than their with a platform that isn't as robust, I should say. Then we, of course, have the definition of cloud. And now our definition of cloud is quite specific, that we only refer to those being hosted in a public cloud on a multi-tenant basis. We don't track necessarily those users who are in a privately hosted cloud in the same way. We lump those with the on-premises definition. So our on-premises definition includes both those with their dedicated on-premise contact center, but also in those privately hosted customer data centers and private cloud instances. Then added to those definitions are three important things that we're going to talk about in terms of automation. The first is we have this calculation coming up in the reports, which we call an agent offset by automation. So what we've done this year to try and figure out the effect and the impact of automation on the agent count in different countries and in our forecasts is to determine a factor by which we think the demand for agents will be offset by agent jobs being removed, essentially. As the demand meets automation and more efficiency, we think that over the next sort of 5-6 years and then into the future, there will be a certain percentage of agent jobs that are offset by automation. So we've created that definition to represent those jobs, while also allowing us to talk and forecast demand as we have been doing previously, to keep those numbers reflective of the growth in demand for CX in the market. And that'll become more understandable once we get into the actual forecast. We then talk about two types of automation primarily at the moment in our forecast. The first is agent assistance, which is where an agent is being helped by a piece of technology to be more efficient rather than being replaced by it. And then we have AI interactions, which is where you have placed an automated or AI-based system in the place of an interaction that would previously have been between an agent and a person. So with those in mind, let's dive into our forecasts. And you'll see that our forecast for growth continues to be quite strong. So currently, in 2023, when our forecast starts, we're looking at just under 176,000 contact center market agent equivalent in the Netherlands, rising up to just under 186,000 by 2028. So still adding 10,000 agents, even in spite of this idea of adding that many agents, just reflecting the growth in the market that we're predicting. So this is a forecast in the demand for agents, which I think is important to understand. So maybe this number doesn't reflect the full number of agent jobs, but it reflects a growing demand for agent jobs needing to be done. And of course, if that job isn't being done, it needs to be automated to match that demand. So overall demand does continue to grow in the market. And one of the things that we are seeing tied to that is a growth in the penetration of cloud services versus on-premise. So currently 30% moving up to 50%. Now, what that means and what that represents is a growing push towards getting cloud-enabled agents. And we're seeing large trends and acceleration in the growth of cloud agents versus legacy on-premise across the industry. And in fact, while that has been a trend for the past few years, we have seen it accelerate further in the last year, mostly driven by these new technologies that are pushing people to the cloud in order to get the benefits. So we think about a lot of your automation, your AI, your new machine learning, and those kind of systems, those are inherently tied to the cloud. It's very hard to have the processing power to run that kind of thing in an on-premise site to the extent that people want to, especially when you're thinking about the levels of database and power. And we've seen a lot of the legacy vendors, pushing people to buy cloud add-ons, even if they're still in an on-premise facility, and moving towards a hybrid deployment because they can sell the cloud add-ons in order to push more revenue generation from those existing legacies. So there's a lot more push as well towards agents becoming hybrid, which is generally pushing overall growth in the number of cloud agents as well. So based on that growth in cloud, we do predict a strong uptick in the number of cloud contact center agents, so going from just under 50,000 2023 to over 80,000 in 2028. And that is keeping in mind the idea that some of those roles aren't going to be replaced. So there is still solid agent growth. Where is that growth coming? We are seeing a growth in the size of contact centers. So some contact centers are still growing by a steady percent. We are also seeing more additions of smaller companies adding agents that were not previously agents. There has generally been a push to take solutions further down market and bring more contact center-like capabilities to smaller companies, which is bringing people who would define themselves as a contact center agent further down the stack to people that would not have before, which is actually seeing a fair bit of growth in smaller companies who are now for the first time having contact center agents, which is quite exciting. On the right then, you have our factor of how many agents are going to be offset due to AI. And you'll see that we've started with a fairly conservative definition in 2023. Machine learning and AI were already well underway, for augmentation and assistance, but the advent of the large language model has really cranked up the amount of capabilities of these automation and these intelligent systems to really help agents get a lot more efficient in their day-to-day working. And because of that, we are expecting that there will be a, sizable increase in the amount of agents that are, being offset, being replaced due to AI. What's interesting, I think, is that this isn't going to be the doomsayer fast offloading of agents that a lot of people were talking about initially. I think a lot of people have agreed in the industry that this is going to taper off. There is going to be a slow offloading of a certain amount of agents, but it's not going to be wake up one morning and half the contact center's gone. I think everyone's pretty happy that that's not going to be the case. The primary reason for that is obviously there's a certain lack of trust in fully automated interactions going in certain, being given a certain amount of freedom. It's better to have these more restricted systems that aren't capable of doing as much, but are trusted and secure and safe. So that means you can't replace a human agent, which has free agency, free action, and the ability to handle anything the customer throws at them with a more regulated AI system. But there's also just the trend that customers still want to talk to human beings. And we've done a lot of consumer research this year, mostly in the UK, but sort of broadened it out a bit to other places as well. And that overwhelmingly showed that depending on the type of issue, so if it became something where there was a complaint or something urgent, customers still want to pick up the phone and they want to connect to a human being when they do that. So there is still a very strong element of desire for human connection in the contact center. So even when we start to see some agents offset by AI, there's still a very strong driving force keeping them in the industry as well. And that's also just being buoyed by that desire for that connection. So moving on then to our actual forecast. So you'll see that just in 2023 we were forecasting just under $50 million in this market. So I guess there's an equivalent in euros, but we forecast dollars because it's worldwide. And then we're moving up to just under 80 million in 2028. So we still predict quite a large growth in revenue in the market, and kind of solid growth over the next 5 years. And there's a lot of trends contributing to that. There's the growth in the number of cloud agents as the cloud transition continues to accelerate. There's the growth in revenue from AI interaction and agent assistance, which is also going to start to accelerate. We're hearing a lot of trends that even where some agent license seats have been lost, the actual amount of revenue generated from the company has been able to be increased because they're paying more to you for their software and their services and replacing that money in their budget by reducing a few seats on the employee side, therefore leading to actually more revenue flowing into the contact center market as versus going to pay for one or two employee jobs in that area. So very strong sort of forecast in terms of growth. I will say that at the moment in our forecast, so the AI part and the agent assistance part doesn't form the majority. We still see most of the revenue coming from seats, but that is one of our things that we have a little red flag next to because it's going to change a lot in the next sort of 4 or 5 years. As these systems grow, there will continue to be a reduction in seats. There will continue to be an emphasis on selling more intelligent systems to bolster revenue. And I think that's just something to be aware of. And we're also seeing to an extent as well, billing models changing on the enterprise, on the vendor side of things as well, as they're trying to figure out a way to charge for the new AI service, the consumption that it's taking on their network, the consumption it's taking on the software side of things as well, on the cloud side of things as well. So we're starting to see the advent of more subscription and consumption-based models. I think even just this week, there was the announcement of a new, I think it was TalkDesk is now doing a subscription at a base level topped up with a consumption model as well, so you can have both. So you pay for a baseline, and then obviously when you start consuming over that, you get charged per unit. And it's very much being billed like cloud services and network services have been billed, where you get a certain number of units which equate to a certain amount of a service, and you get that. So that's just one thing to be aware of on the horizon in terms of how this model will change. But I think we'll all agree that this is a reasonably good growth forecast for the next 5 years. So let's move on then and talk about just some of the key trends that Cavell is seeing in the space. These trends come from conversations with service providers and vendors, as well as sort of indicated and guided by our enterprise surveying that we do, and really just trying to capture exactly what is happening in the space from both a market side and of course from a business trajectory side as well. So let's just talk first about AI and AI growth. So lots of talk in the last year about AI. People are very keen on it. It's obviously got a lot of potential. But the trend for the last year has very much been, we're doing a lot of interesting stuff, but we're not quite sure yet how to use it. We're not quite sure what the use case is. We're not sure if we trust the use case enough to actually deploy it on the network. And I think those three trends are what has kind of slowed adoption, as well as a pricing issue. I was speaking to a large telco from the UK, and he said, well, currently it costs me, this is just an example of figures, $15 an hour for an agent to answer the phone. And then the first proof of concept we did of ChatGPT, which was about, I think, June or July last year, it was going to cost me $12 an hour to run the ChatGPT service. So why would I go through the hassle of setting it up, onboarding it, getting it ready, and also having to deal with removing that agent when I can just keep the agent and the price difference? But there are a lot of moves to see those prices come down, like query caching in ChatGPT and things like that, which are going to potentially make that cost argument a lot more reasonable, which may lead to the rollout of these services. But there is still a very large amount of distrust in using large language model based AI to do free form customer service. And I think that's just important to acknowledge based on where we are now. People are building restricted, limited models using the sort of things that we've seen for years, but with a bit more nuance coming in from LLMs to better understand what the customer's saying, to as their automated customer service, their IVRs and their chatbots. They're not going through a free-form Gen AI focused system yet. It's not trusted. Where we are seeing the AI growth come in is on the back end, is on the analysis and on the analytics. There is a huge lot of development being focused now and sort of the end of last year and moving into now on that sentiment and intent-based analysis. So taking those large language models that are very good at understanding what a customer is asking and plugging that into your systems to better understand what they're saying, what they're feeling, and those kind of things, and some fraud use cases coming out as well. But those use cases are developing now and they will be embraced, I guess, in the next year or two, but they're not quite there yet. The other thing to note is that convergence of technology offerings is continuing across almost all of the vendors. People are just trying to build more and more into their platform, partly tied to AI. They want to have a central repository for data, and that means expanding your platform to gather more data. They want to increase the capabilities, but we're also just seeing, generally the desire to service more of the CX stack, and we'll get into more of what is being bundled into the idea of CX in a minute. But generally, this idea that what was a contact center before is now an omni-channel contact center. It is something that now offers, social media, and then people are starting to use that because they want to tie the data from their contact center into managing their agents. So they're bringing in workforce management, and the expansion of the technology in the space continues to grow. We're also seeing a continued growth in SME focus. So that's in multiple ways. So that's firstly more demand from SMEs for contact center light solutions. So we call them UC plus solutions, but there's a lot of different names for them. As the pressure on SMEs grows to provide better customer service, in a world of TikTok and a lot of the consumer surveying we've shown has shown that SME pressure on customer service is continuing to grow. The idea of a small company not providing good customer service becomes harder to understand when the narrative of ChatGPT and stuff like that is around. Customers are starting to express more pressure on companies to, deliver a good quality of customer service, and that's not leaving the SME out of it. So they are looking to buy, some of them for the first time, contact center solutions, whether they're just contact center light solutions involving, a queue and a bit of agent management, or whether they're trying to buy something a little bit more teethy. Really depends on their vertical. But we are seeing a lot of people saying that they are starting to sell more volume of contact center services into the SME as well, which is obviously where the value comes in from selling to that market. We're also seeing a broader discussion about focus on business outcomes becoming the main way that salespeople are succeeding when they're selling contact center. There's been a broad shift to shifting the sales target from more technical staff, the IT team, higher up a stack, to more C-level and broader stakeholders getting involved in the purchasing decisions of the contact center. So what that means is that as the technology has gotten more complex in certain areas, the need to focus on what it's going to do for the business rather than how that specific technology functions has become more and more important. Also, the risk and the pain of digital transformation has become more relevant as well. And because of that, it's become much more important to get C-level buy-in. But also what we're seeing is just a broader shifting of how many stakeholders are involved in every decision. So we surveyed this, and I'll show some data in a minute. And the conclusion very much was that it's not just one IT director making the decision now. CX has become such an integral part of the business in terms of how they manage their customer data and sort of how they market to those customers, etc., that lots of different teams and people want to get involved in that decision, including the C-level. So salespeople are having to shift to target those as well. And then, as I kind of talked about in the market data, so I won't dwell on it for too much, but the advance in automation is not leading to an immediate reduction in the number of agents. As I've kind of already said, there's a lot of reasons that that's not happening, from a lack of trust to a desire to keep humans involved, from the customer side wanting to speak to humans, and also just, it's better to augment the staff you currently have and phase some of them out slowly rather than reduce the number very quickly and bring in lots of risk of not having the services or the service not working into your business. So a lot of companies are choosing the safe option, which is expected because CX is so important to their business. So let's go into some slides that kind of break down those trends a bit more and just give some more visual examples of the sort of things we were talking about. So the first thing to state, so when we look at the state of the market, is that what was once a playground for CCaaS vendors has become a playground for everyone. So we've got obviously our traditional contact center providers coming in, the Avayas, the Ciscos, the Genesises. Then we've got entrants from the UCaaS market, in the vendor side, 8x8, RingCentral, Zoom, all trying to get into the CCaaS market as well. We've got point solution providers, Axies, Dubbers, even someone like Sprinklr, who did social media monitoring, but now has a full end-to-end CCaaS coming into the space as well. And then we've got big moves by the infrastructure, the hyperscale providers, Amazon and Microsoft, especially really focusing on the contact center space. And I think the interesting thing as well is not necessarily just focusing on the high-end contact center space. Microsoft adding queuing to Teams, for example, is one area where that is something that a small company could use. So there is a lot of question as to where the boundaries will fall when all these companies have started entering the market. And then, of course, you've got your CPaaS providers who are trying to build more and more CCaaS capabilities into their platforms, and then the large native CCaaS providers as well, who are coming in and really leaning down on the cloud and the AI and trying to build that. And I think what we're trying to emphasize with this slide, which I think is very important, is that what you traditionally thought of as the CCaaS market has now become this very, very broad tapestry. And there are kind of competition points coming in from lots of places, maybe that you wouldn't expect it. So, when you talk to someone like Sprinklr, for example, who have a large channel of social media based partners, right, who previously have sold social media monitoring tools, and now Sprinklr is coming around and saying, well, we're selling a CCaaS now. Some of those partners are being lured by the idea of entering the CCaaS market. And I think that presents a range of competition from companies that you probably wouldn't have considered before. And that is happening in small ways all across the market. So it's quite interesting to see, now that we're at this point of market broadening consolidation, that entry points and competition is coming from a lot of different places. So what does that look like from a technology standpoint? Now, we've drawn up this chart, and when we were making this chart, our goal was literally anything we've seen on any CCaaS platform, put it in the diagram, and we'll just figure out how it fits together. And maybe the very largest CCaaS platforms have all of these capabilities. It's not to say that this is what everyone should have, or even what customers want, right? And that's, I think, important to understand. So this is, if you think about the largest CCaaS platforms, what they're offering, a lot of them now do have the workflow management, they have the workforce management, they have their own UCaaS, they have customer journey management, they have all of the channels, and then they have a strong data intelligence, machine learning, data platform layer as well as offering infrastructure, cloud infrastructure, and those kind of things. What do customers actually want and what they're willing to pay for? It really depends on the size of customer you're targeting. So, if you're looking at sort of people who want a simple, more informal contact center, really they just want UCaaS plus some channels plus a bit of agent management, and they're going to be happy with that, right? They've got their queue, they've got their agent management platform, and then they've got the channels that their customers currently use. And then the second you start to add a bit more complexity, some companies might want marketing, some companies might want some more agent workforce management, some people might want more data-based services. So it's really hard to say exactly what the ideal CCaaS looks like for each size of the market, because it's not really market size dependent. A lot of it is vertical dependent, and kind of depends on the needs of a specific business and industry. We've seen some very intelligent contact centers being sold to very small companies in, say, the healthcare industry, for example, who just have a lot of needs for data protection, data intelligence, even though their company size isn't what you might expect. But the point is that convergence is happening. The people on the previous slide are looking to build more and more robust systems, and also considering how they scale those systems down to match the different sizes of the market, and using cloud to make their services available. This then is just reinforcing the trend that I mentioned about stakeholders being involved. So previously, when we've done this, quite a few years ago, the IT technical lead was much, much higher. And now you can see that if you look at the stakeholders who are involved in a CCaaS decision, you can see it now involves the executive team, the comms management team, any line of business teams, and the sales team, all getting involved in agreeing what contact center that's going to be. And of course, that means from a sales and marketing perspective, you have to be able to speak not just the technical discussion, but also broaden that out to business outcomes, broaden that out to marketing or sales discussions, how that's going to affect inbound and outbound, all these kind of things. So there's a much broader reach for sales messaging as well. One of the questions that we've had in the last year, and I think it is pertinent to this discussion, is what is happening to skills on the channel side. And I think it's very interesting, because when we look at that diagram of all the different technologies that are coming into the contact center space, and then we look at what skills are required to sell those technologies, there is sort of not necessarily, there's a bit of a mishmash between what the channel currently has and what it would need to do if it wanted to sell these larger platforms. Now, again, if we go back to the idea that not all of the customers in the CCaaS marketplace want to buy that big, full-fat contact center, you get the idea that not all of these skills are needed at every single type of channel partner. But you might be looking at this list and thinking, okay, well, I know that my customers want to buy some sort of AI, machine learning thing from me. What AI expertise do I have to offer them to help them along with that journey? And that's where I think this is a really interesting sort of thought, because we've spoken to a lot of vendors, and one of the questions that I'm asking them now, and I have been for the last 6 months, which is very pertinent, is how, especially if you're a UCaaS vendor getting into the CCaaS space, which is how much of your channel is ready to sell your new CCaaS platform, how much of your channel is ready to sell your new AI platform, how much of your channel is ready to sell your new omni-channel platform. And that's a very interesting question. And the answer is never 100%. The answer is always, I think one vendor we spoke to said, well, we're launching a new CCaaS like platform today, so it's more like the UC Plus, so it was call recording, queues, and a bit of agent management, with a few little bits of AI tacked on. And I said, okay, well, how many of your partners do you think can sell that currently? And they said, well, we think 30% could sell it by themselves and offer everything we do. We think another 30% could probably sell it if we help them a lot. And we think 40% couldn't sell it right now and would have to do a lot of work. So I think it's important to understand that when we're looking at all of these new developments, the skills on the channel are having a big impact on how that technology is going. And what skills you develop is going to be very dependent on what your customers need. But there is sort of like this large potential skills gap if you're trying to sell very large contact center deployments. Do you have all of those sort of people who are going to help the customers understand the data output of the new platform? For example, if you have data scientists who are going to help them understand the best use of the workforce management platform for training their agents and all these other complex things that are now part of a CCaaS deployment. But to sort of tie into this idea that contact centers are growing, especially in smaller companies, I wanted to put up this slide that just shows that the number of companies that are purchasing a contact center license is quite high. Now, it's important to note that when you talk about smaller companies, their definition of a contact center license isn't the same. It's not as robust. They might think they're buying a contact center, but actually they're just buying an inbound, a couple of inbound lines and something to manage them. But there is this notion that the contact center, the number of people who have a license is growing, and the number of people who have, a few licenses is growing. So there's a lot of companies who would say, even in the 50 to 249, that they have a contact center license, at least for one of their employees, but not really for more than 20% of their employees. So they have these little contact centers. And we're seeing a lot of smaller contact centers start to be born. And obviously the hope is that those will expand and grow and bring more sort of agents into the market as well as we move forward. So this is an interesting slide I like to put up. And again, it ties into that discussion. I said a moment ago that the channel isn't necessarily, the UCaaS channel especially, is not necessarily ready in its entirety to sell CCaaS platforms. And I think that's a big challenge and an area of differentiation for partners by being ready to sell those platforms. So we have internally, we have this platform, and not just internally, I should say, we do sell it these days, but where we sell we sell a platform that has a database of all of these channel partners across the English-speaking markets in the world, and we keyword search that database so you can figure out who's selling what and why and what they're doing with it. And what we found that is in all of the resellers that we looked at across all the English-speaking markets, only 11% of them were selling CCaaS, and 50% of the ones that were selling CCaaS were based in the US. So out of the entire IT channel, selling everything from security to printers and UC, the number who is actually selling CCaaS isn't that large. And a lot of that is based in the US. And also, interestingly, like when we looked at the data as well, we tried to see where the overlaps were from, collaboration providers and those kind of things as to which channel base was more ready to sell CCaaS. And the Zoom customer base has a lot of CCaaS providers, apparently, whereas Microsoft and Cisco are a bit further down. But it's just interesting to think that within the current landscape, it might be easy to think that everyone is selling CCaaS and everyone has the skills to sell CCaaS, et cetera, et cetera. But actually the data shows that we're still very much at the stage where being able to sell CCaaS well to your target demographic as a UC partner is still a differentiator, because not everyone has made that shift onto that. So it is still an area where it is possible to gain business and to differentiate yourself from your competition. So this slide really is just showing the evolution in the contact center and where we're going. So starting off, way back with the call center, then of course moving up to a contact center as we add in more channels. And then you get to this idea of an experience center, which we've kind of been at for, I think, the last couple of years, where we're less focused on channels, we're more focused on being channel agnostic, and we start to focus on building a broader customer experience platform that can handle all of these sorts of incoming requests, and you start to add in a bit of automation. And really where the industry is going, which I do want to highlight because this is going to be available at multiple different scales and multiple different levels of complexity, is this intelligent experience center where it is omni-channel by default. You have efficiency with lots of integrations into lots of different parts of the organization with some sort of intelligence that can bring savings and things like that into, and efficiencies into the experience center as well. You have a lot of holistic metric tracking. It's not just about how quickly you answer the phone and how happy your customers are. It's also how happy are your staff, how well is the system working, are the calls getting to the right specialist, all those kind of things. And you also have sort of a lot of internal resources that aren't just a traditional contact center agent being used by the system to service customer needs. And we're seeing a lot of that now with a lot more sort of growth of informal agents, people who don't spend their full time serving a contact center, being brought in for specific queries, being brought in for specific instances, or just working a bit of their day serving customer service queries. So we are very much in a stage of transition to this intelligent experience center, and it is just worth acknowledging that that is going to be felt by all areas of the business, because it's going to scale up and scale down. And things like, traditional UC systems make one part of that, as do traditional contact center systems. But then you also have integrations with collaboration platforms, CRM and data management systems, employee management tools, and those kind of things as well. I want to do a few quick slides on automation, just to show that it is a growing trend, although I'm sure a lot of people will be aware that it is a growing trend. But when we ask people about their automated case resolution, the US has got quite a large amount of automated case resolution, but it is growing in other areas as well. And then when you ask people what their predicted trend is for their automated case resolution, you can see that the majority of companies expect it to increase. So really, automation of case resolution is here to stay, and it wouldn't be that surprising if Europe and the UK end up closer to the US within a few years' time. We just have to pass a few trust hurdles and get those automated systems in place that we rely on. But there's lots of predictions of automation. I mean, even in the UK, HMRC, our tax company, is predicting that they can automate maybe 30-40% of their current workload into a better app, into a website, those kind of things. And that's not to say they won't have more people to deal with when more people start calling them up because they think it works, but there is just this idea that there's going to be a lot of automation rolling out, which I think is worth acknowledging. And then I want to talk just a bit about where Cavell sees automation going and what the end game is for the industry. And I think this is just important and kind of interesting to talk about, because there's a lot of discussion about where AI is going and what is possible. And I want to put this up, but I'll probably switch to this slide, which is a bit more visual, is that Cavell has divided automation into 4 or 5 phases. And these are not gospel numbers. They're just there to provide an illustration of where we are and where we're going and where we could go, but we might not decide to go. So start off in phase 1, you can see that 80% of people in this model are, manually dealing with customer service, and 20% are customers self-servicing. And then you bring in some automation capabilities and you say, okay, let's have 30% of agents doing some sort of manual job. Let's have 20% of agents reviewing what the automated systems are doing. And then let's have 30% of people self-servicing and 20% now doing automated interactions. Phase 3 accelerates that a bit more. Automated interactions go up. Self-service stays the same because you kind of assume that the self-service is taking as many people as it can, but the people who want to speak to an agent, because the self-service can't do what they expect it to do, increases a bit. But you decrease the amount of people that are manually doing customer service and increase the number of people who are doing automation review. And I think it's important to say that that automation review might also be interacting with the customer. It's just about seeing what's happening on the automated system and then jumping in to interfere. And then you increase that probably to phase 4, where you have a lot of automation capabilities and you start rolling them out, and suddenly there's a lot more automated interactions happening. And this is kind of conceptually an idea that I like talking about in terms of where we could go, because when the amount of automation capabilities we have increases to the point where we can automate a lot of conversations, there's still a question, I think, in the industry as to whether or not we will. And that's why I like to talk about this in terms of a future-looking idea, is the question, I guess, to the audience and generally to the industry is, how far do you think we actually go when we have the capability? So do we go, and I've labeled it as what I call a production line contact center here, where we'll assume it's a fast-moving consumer goods company. 99% of their queries are just pretty easy to handle returns, where the AI can scan the image and make sure that it's actually what's being sent back, or see if there's a defect with the product or that kind of thing. And you automate almost every interaction with the customer. Now that's a bit far-fetched, but vendors have told me that 1 or 2 of their customers in that market have said, at what point can I get rid of my agents? Because when they heard about AI, and the answer was, well, not anytime soon, but at some point, sure. So there is some desire from companies for that, to get this fully automated system where they have minimal agents, and the agents are just that 10% who are reviewing what the system's doing, making sure it's working properly. And then the other one I've labeled is this ideological idea of a boutique contact center, where you could automate away that 40% extra agents, but you don't actually want to, because part of the idea is that humans want to speak to other humans. We've kind of been talking about through this presentation. So within that, you create the idea that I could automate away more of my more of my agent base, but I choose not to because the service that customers want from me is human first. It isn't automated. And this is kind of where I think the industry will actually stop before we get to this production line contact center. And this is one of the reasons that I like to talk about this idea, is that even though we could get to a point where we might, we're thinking in 5 years time, maybe longer, where we could automate every interaction in a contact center, there will probably be a point in the next 2, 3, 4 years where customers decide that enough is enough, and they still want to talk to human beings. And all of our data points that happens. When something goes wrong, people want to speak to a human being. And that's why a lot of the technology that's being tested now is about making that human being more efficient, making the connection to that human being happen quicker, reducing wait times via automation. It's not about completely removing the workforce and automating everything. And I think we'll never get to that point for the majority of companies where they go below that 50% agent mark, based on where they are now, because they're going to want to keep those humans involved, because keeping those involved keeps your customers speaking and interacting with humans. There's also another interesting trend that I've been hearing a little bit about recently, tied to, and this is just throwing out there as a food for thought, think about for the rest of the year, where as you increase the amount of data ability to understand the intent of customers, you can increase the monitoring of customers that are coming to your website, and you might be able to better figure out people who come to your website who are likely to make a sale or make a purchase if you reach out to them in a certain way. And you might find that we actually see some growth in contact center agents on the outbound front who are tackled with harnessing those customers who have a high intent to purchase when they visit the website, but drop off the website for whatever reason. Because a lot of companies might figure out that if they call that person at the right time, that person might be prompted to come back and make a purchase. So it's just an area where we might be seeing some growth, but I think it's worth just talking about where automation is going and where Cavell sees it going. And we kind of do see that there will be a very hard stop in agent reduction numbers at some point in the future when we've kind of automated everything that we're comfortable with, and we want to keep humans involved because that's what our customers want. But the automation is going to come as well.
Not really a question. I think maybe food for thought as well. Avaya just announced yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, or at least this week, that they were not going to offer any solutions for CCaaS under 200 seats. So I think that's an interesting move from a legacy company, but in the end, a really good opportunity for us, I think, in terms of picking up those smaller CCaaS companies using CCaaS under those 200 threshold, at least in the Netherlands. There are quite a lot. So I think that's a good opportunity for us with our channel partners. So
yeah, Michael, that's actually a really good point, and I think Avaya is a bit of a unique use case because obviously they're having their own sort of internal business pressures, which everyone is sort of familiar with, have been going on for the sort of past decade and gradually deteriorating. But if you look at all of the leading, the sort of top tier CCaaS providers, so NICE, Genesys, and Five9, I would put in that sort of, but they're all actually moving up the market rather than coming down, which I think, to your point, Michael, leaves this opportunity for channel providers on this call to cater for that market, not just the sort of informal contact center market that Finbarr was talking about in terms of UC with additional capabilities that Finbarr was saying. Teams have added capabilities in the Q app. WebEx have added capabilities from Contact Center Essentials down into their calling licenses as well, but actually dedicated contact center for smaller businesses. So I think that you're absolutely right. There is a gap in the market, not just created by what Avaya are doing, but as you say, they've got that really substantial existing legacy base and they don't want to deal with anyone below 200 seats. So that creates an opportunity, but also there's that sort of gap in the market where the really large CCaaS providers don't want to come down necessarily, creating an opportunity for the channel in various markets.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyone else? No. I have some points as well. It's more of a statement. So I think there are a lot of integrations and like AI systems that are on the horizon, but I think the whole story really is that it's about what the users want, which is, you know, still being able to communicate with an agent. So really and then there's also the value of the seat is decreasing. So it's all about us being that that trusted advisor, so you can add value to the systems that we're providing. You know, finding those reliable tools, even if it AI or not AI, to enable you to add value and maintain that customer experience is what I've learned today.
Yeah, and Jennifer, I think that's a really key point, and Finbarr touched on it in the presentation. Actually, a lot of that capability is out there in the market already in terms of automating case resolution.
Yeah.
But we did at Cavell, we did a study of consumers. This was just in the UK market, but I think the trends are probably applicable in the EU as well. And we asked consumers, you know, are they open to automated systems? And it really depended on the type of interaction. So if it's as Finbarr was talking about, sort of a routine, if you've got a return or a non-urgent inquiry, generally you're quite happy to use an automated system. As soon as the type of interaction changes and it's a more urgent inquiry, you've got a complaint, generally it's when I want to shout at someone, then I want to speak directly to an agent. So it really does depend on the type of interaction. So to your point, I think it's absolutely key that as the channel partner, as the trusted advisor for your customers, they need to understand their business, what types of interactions they think they can automate effectively that are going to meet the requirements of their end customers, and then what types of interactions are going to have human interaction. Because as Finbarr said, and with that sort of hypothetical example where we're looking at the sort of automation journey, it really is going to vary business by business what types of interactions are coming in as to what you can automate.
Yeah,
effectively.
Yeah.
And that customer research was fascinating because about half of the people who responded said they have customer service issues they don't service because they'd have to deal with customer service, right? So there's a lot of there's a large potential of these unserviced claims that are out there that are being deflected, or people aren't doing it because the perception of customer service is, you know, not good in certain markets. Where again, if we talk about the impact on the market and the number of agents having to work at companies, the second you make your customer service platform more efficient and you get a reputation for that, the volume that you begin to see starts to increase and you have to handle it. And, you know, that's the problem that a lot of large companies are facing, why they've removed the number from their website and all these kind of things. But the fact is that when you've got someone, like Patrick says, who's got an urgent query or a complaint they need to deal with, the worst thing you can do is take the number away from that person. So, you know, it's on the industry to make sure that you are contactable by phone. You can make people reach a human agent while also managing you know, the efficiencies to make sure the wait time isn't too long. So those classic problems haven't gone away. If anything, I think one of the things I was talking about in my presentation from our surveying is that the expectation from the customer side of things for all sizes of business has been increasing pretty steadily in the past 3 or 4 years. And one of the biggest culprits as to why that's happening in ChatGPT and is the awareness of the capabilities of large language models. People say, if I can type, you know, question about anything into ChatGPT and get an answer quickly, why can I not get good customer service from X or Y company when they have this budget and when my business is important to them, right? As it should be, right?
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. That was a really interesting session. We've got a UK session later today as well. So yeah, so we'll send this recording out to everybody.